on today's show, it's kind of like the thing you avoid is the thing that you need to be focusing on, because nobody wants to think about pain. Nobody wants to talk about pain, but that's the very thing that you need to talk about to progress.
Because you can't say you go through something traumatic and you have an infection. How you know an infection? If I bring up a topic, you know what, and you all of a sudden you get a little warm on the collar. If you don't say nothing, warm under the collar, and that's when you say you get hot, starting to sweat like right around. Yeah, warm under the collar, get a little hot under the collar.
Red,
yeah,
feeling your face get hot.
Yeah. So I mean, that's you got an infection.
We are Tristan and Michael. When we got married, we didn't really know what we were getting into. The busyness and challenges of a blended family, trying to figure out how to love an imperfect person, dealing with the ups and downs of becoming one, and everything that goes into having a successful relationship. Let's learn how to heal, how to forgive, and how to grow. This is Fused. Thank you for tuning in. We are Tristan and Michael, and you are listening to Fused, transparent conversations for marriage, family, and relationships. We invite you to join us as we discuss perspectives that are thought about but not talked about. So tell your friends and family to check us out and connect with us on social media at Fused Marriages, or join the conversation by emailing us at info@fusedmarriages.com. All right. Michael, we getting into some stuff today.
We are getting in, but before we get in, we have an announcement to make.
Yes, we do.
We are going to be on a station called Fused Radio.
Yes.
That's not a coincidence. Mm-mm. It's a station that we started, y'all. But it's not just about us. That's the thing about it. But
I feel like we should have had like some sort of drum roll or something.
Probably should have.
Like, okay, let's do that again. Ready?
Okay, hold on. Crowd comes after it, right?
Yeah, you messed up my whole vibe there.
So yeah, we are at fusedradio.com, and we're actually on Tuesdays.
Yes.
At 7 p.m. Mm-hmm. So check us out.
And it's a little bit different. So here we talk about marriage and family and relationships. Our show is called The Conversation, and we are having conversations about culture, about life, about things that are happening in the United States and around the world. So it's literally from your home and what affects you and your community to what's going on in homes and communities globally. So it's a really fun show.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
We talk about more stuff. Everybody thinks we all just involved with marriages, and which we are. We love it because we're passionate about it. But we have other ideas about other things that are happening. So,
and I think it's part of being a holistic human. Like, obviously, you have the things that you're passionate about and that drive you and that are important to you, and to all of us that should be aspects of our relationships. But there's also other things that impact us about what's happening with the criminal justice system, what's happening in education, what's happening in the arts, what's happening in Africa or in England or Europe or any other place around the world. So all of these things, they affect us in some way. What's happening in the environment, all of that. So we like to get into that, into the conversation. So we have Fused Radio. So make sure you guys go over there, check us out, subscribe on the website, fusedradio.com. Follow. We have great broadcasters, like really amazing ones that we're going to feature here in the coming months. So make sure that you check it out. And I want to say this too. Hey, y'all, when y'all are listening to our shows, please comment. Go ahead and subscribe, but let us know what you're thinking. We want to have a conversation with you. So when this pops up on your YouTube or on your podcast, talk back with us, because we want this to be an ongoing dialogue. So that said, let's get into it.
Let's jump right into it. So I'm on a little bit of my Iyanla vibe, you know what I mean? Just
Iyanla Vanzant.
Yeah, she's a cold-blooded woman.
Doctor.
Yeah, she's cold-blooded. But this topic, I think it affects everybody in different ways. So whether it's you directly or your spouse or somebody that you know, and the topic is family infections. Okay.
Family infections.
Right.
All right.
So people may have some ideas. Okay, what, family infections, what is that about? What are we talking about? So, we're talking about when you get an infection, an idea or example, rather, an infection could be a divorce. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Somebody could actually have lost a child. Mm-hmm. Somebody could deal with abuse. Mm-hmm. Somebody could have had, a parent that, that maybe abandoned them. Okay. So we're talking about those type of issues, right? When we say infection, it's like, okay, how do you know you have an infection? right? That's the question I had to ask myself. How do I know if I have an infection? Typically, you know what? Because we all get cut and get different things happen to us, whatever. You know, I can put Band-Aids on and it heals up and we're fine.
Yeah.
But we know we get an infection when we get a fever, right? So you can have a cut and you think it's healed, but you get a fever because it got infected. So if you have an issue that you think you dealt with and you get a fever after the fact, or it still bothers you to the point where, you know what, you get distraught or have some thoughts about whatever, and it challenged you in that moment, you might have an infection that you have to deal with.
Okay, hold on. Let's you jump right in.
The deep
okay,
end of the pool.
We are talking about family infections. So these are things that have happened in our family that have gone unaddressed.
Yep.
And are now causing more some negativity in our lives, in our physical or emotional or spiritual or mental health, because we have not addressed some things that might have started out as a pain or as a wound, but have now really just taken over in our body, have metastasized into something even worse.
Use them big SAT words.
SAT was a long time ago.
People still taking it right now.
I like the word of the day. So
that's good.
Okay. So we have introduced this kind of idea of something happening in your world, in your life, that has now influenced or affected you to the point where everything is now being influenced by this infection, because that's what happens. It's like you might start off as a cut and then it goes up your arm, and now you're looking at different kinds of surgery, or something has influenced and come into your bloodline, all of that. So when it comes to the family, that one infection it goes beyond you, right? It goes to your kids, to aunts, uncles, other family members, because you haven't really dealt with the issue. So let's jump into that conversation. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to start off with a little quick story. Actually, it's a real life story that I was talking about it with my dad, and he was telling me about his grandfather. And my dad does a lot of research on ancestry, and is kind of really understanding what the family dynamics were back then and trying to connect all the pieces, right? He's just real big into that. Well, he was talking about his grandfather, and he says his grandfather had lost some land, had got land, probably like 80 acres, but somehow he was trying to figure out what happened to the 80 acres. So he found out that, this grandfather, he lost his wife, and he lost his mother, all in the same year. And he had 4 kids, and he didn't know he basically went to in a shell space of like not knowing what to do. So he ended up sending the kids off to different family members across the state of Texas, Dallas, Waco, this, that, and the other. And he ended up becoming an alcoholic and losing this land. And like, we wonder, right? And we would think like, man, okay, why come our family can't get over that hump? Or, you know what I mean? And the issues, like, we're trying to figure out what happened, what's going on. And could it be that infection started, right, with him, passed on to his kids? His kids had kids. They felt abandoned, right? Their dad basically left them, right? Set them off to, other family members because he couldn't deal with the pressure and stress. Yeah. And it just kept going on. And the infection, people say they healed, they're over it, but they may not be. And there's an infection in the family of what has happened to, okay, why come we can't produce to the certain level we think we should be able to produce to?
Yeah, there's a lot in that story, because you're talking about dealing with grief. I think that there's kind of an infection, because we're going to use that word today. There's an infection aspect to that, because some of us don't know what to do with our grief. We don't know what to do with the hurt. So some of us lash out, and that can be something that brings on an infection, because now your kids and your spouse are getting the brunt of you not knowing how to manage your emotions. And that can be challenging depending on what brought those about. Like, some of it's not just overreacting. Some of it is truly, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. I'm struggling. And then others might bury their emotions, which is just as detrimental, because then you start distancing yourself, and you stop connecting, and you stop wanting to be around people or do activities. So I think that there's a lot to be said for how we manage grief, particularly, and I want to say this, particularly in minority communities, because in minority communities, we have a lot of interconnected like family dynamics, and we are at higher risk for certain diseases, certain stress related diseases. And that is particularly important for, and it's both important for both men and women, but on the spectrum, men are the ones that tend not to even address it. Like a lot of us, we might consider, okay, I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to talk this out. I'm going to talk to a girlfriend. I'm going to start journaling. A lot of Black and Latino men, they just going to stuff it down. Yep. And then they're responding to their wife or to their sons or to their daughters with this kind of like, hey, I don't deal with my emotions. I can't handle yours. This is not how we act. And then that's when I've talked about it in a previous show, but that's when you get that kind of toxic masculinity because you don't know how to handle you. So you don't know how to teach other people how to handle them. And then they don't know how to handle themselves. And then they just operate. It's like this cycle where you're just operating in repressed pain, just getting through your day. So I think that that's something that you just brought up that I think is really an interesting concept of how pain can be something that can be an infection that we're passing down from generation to generation, and how we're distancing ourselves from friends. Because like we said on the show, we talk about our own stuff. And I know one of the things for me is I really have a hard time reaching out in the middle of pain, but there is something to be said for showing your scars. Say like, hey, this is real life. This is what it is. I think we've heard before, like, oh man, we want a marriage like y'all. And we're like, do you know what we have gone through and continue to work through? Like, it's just not easy. And there are people that we look at that we're like, oh man, they're awesome. They've got it together. And I'm sure they would say the same to us. Like, Tristan and Michael, we didn't wake up like this. You know, this was not that easy. So I think talking about these kinds of things, how we deal with the infections in our life, the things that are affecting our children, that are affecting us, that are keeping us emotionally distant or mentally in captivity, that is the thing that we need to be addressed. It's kind of like the thing you avoid is the thing that you need to be focusing on, because nobody wants to think about pain. Nobody wants to talk about pain, but that's the very thing that you need to talk about to progress.
Yeah, I think, if you kind of put it all in a nutshell, like, you know what, if you have an infection, we're going to give some examples of what that looks like. If you have an infection, at least you have some questions in your mind. But in order to deal with it, we're going to give you the answer right now without having to wait to the end. It's like, you have to talk about it. I think Tristan said it best. Like, you have to talk about it with somebody to really get that thing worked out, right? A lot of times we get accustomed to living in a painful situation and think that's normal. So like, you know what I mean? If in this case, you say my great grandfather, had this issue or whatever. And like, let's say he lived in poverty and then I lived in poverty, my little kid lived in poverty. It's like, that's normal then, right? Not knowing, saying, okay, hold on. We come from something else. Now, what happened along the way to get us off that something else, right? Now something is embedded in me to think that this is normal and it's not. And sometimes you got to talk to somebody and say, hey, you know what? I don't know. You should be thinking like that. You should be thinking bigger than that. You should be, seeing yourself different than that. You should be talking to yourself different than that. And it's like a lot of times we don't do that, right? We get accustomed to a situation or a life and thinking that, okay, all that is cool and normal. And it's not, because we should in our minds, we should be in our minds be thinking living above, but like in our minds, we think we're living below that.
There's so much to this. So this could be multi-series, but there's something to be said for learning our history. And I'm talking from an academic standpoint. Particularly Black history is not taught in schools as part of the curriculum. It's in college, possibly an elective, depending on the school that you go to. When you're a student in high school and elementary school, for Black students, you hear about Martin Luther King, you hear about Malcolm X, and you hear about slavery. And you think growing up that is, and even slavery, like you don't even really hear a lot of truth about what happened, what really happened. Like seeing a couple pictures doesn't describe it, and then seeing a couple marches doesn't describe it. So what you end up doing to our students, to ourselves, to our community is we say, okay, well, this is the totality of who we are. Because we don't have records that say, oh, well, this is our bloodline from Africa, or, this is even a lot of Latinos, like, okay, this is what happened, or Caribbean, this is what happened. you don't have that. That's not even taught. You are taught Anglo-Saxon history, European history. You're taught British literature. And so you miss so much of who we are. So then we kind of are living in this constant sense of identity crisis. Like you were saying, like we don't have a lot of connection to who we really are. And so we subscribe to, a few chapters in a textbook 1 year in high school, And so I bring all that to say that that's part of the infection, is not recognizing. And this is true even of people that are adopted or foster home. Like you are still important. You still come from a lineage of people that are valuable and that have a contribution. And so I think that there is, hey, if you didn't have a certain parent in your life, we all have to step up and start doing some mentorship, start investing, because there are kids right now that are lost and living in a lost place. There are adults right now that just kind of need a friend to talk through this. Like, yeah, you grew up in a fostering environment or you didn't have a parent there. Like you said in the beginning of the show, you're not over it just because it's in the past. Like you still need to talk through some of that. So one of the issues that you brought up, Michael, was as infection, which I kind of thought were interesting. You brought up like divorce as an infection. You brought up some like relationship trauma as an infection. Kind of talk me through how you see those particular things as infections and how do we go about talking or really talking that out?
Yeah, I mean, I think some people have gone through some traumatic things, whether it's divorce, whether it's, if you're a single parent trying to raise a kid by yourself.
Yeah.
Whether, if you're the kid aspect of it and you have a parent that you only see so often or you don't see him at all.
Right.
Or I know some people, they don't know who their daddy is.
Yeah.
Right. They know a name.
That's real.
But they never met their daddy. You know what I mean? Like, and for people to say like, okay, you know what? Oh no, I'm good. It doesn't bother me. They lying. They not being truthful with really how deep that's affect. That has to be so painful that you can kind of live. You can live beyond it, right, and live past it. But it's affecting who you are and who you think you can be, right? Then it doesn't stop there. It's affecting how you relate to other people, because you can't say you go through something traumatic and you have an infection. How you know it affects you? If I bring up a topic, you know what, and you all of a sudden you get a little warm on the collar. If you don't say nothing, warm under the collar, and that's when you say you get hot, starting to sweat like right around. Yeah, warm under the collar, get a little hot under the collar.
Red,
yeah,
feeling your face get hot.
Yeah. So I mean, that's you got an infection, and like I think like some of the signs is like is how you are talking, right, and how you are talking in your language, how you talking to yourself.
Yeah. Ooh, jump into that. How you are talking to yourself.
Yeah, so I guess we try to subscribe. We're not perfect in any shape, stretch of imagination, but it's like we try to talk to ourselves in a certain way that's like, man, we trying to. I got to talk myself up.
Yeah.
When I'm going through, I go through like everybody else go through. You go through like everybody go through. You know what I mean? We trying to talk ourselves up in a way that's like, okay, I can get through it.
Yeah.
And everybody's not doing that.
Well, I think it's interesting too, because if you watch a lot of sports, and if you watch sports, you will see teams talk their team up. Like, and you'll see coaches like, y'all are the best in the country. Y'all gonna go out here, y'all gonna kill it. Da, 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 da. And you kind of need that from your partner too. Yeah, you need, hey, Tristan, you got it. You can make it through this, whatever that this is. And the same for, hey, Michael, come on now. We gonna make it through. We gonna make it happen. We've got these things that we have, these goals, these initiatives. But you also, it's great to have partners do that, but you have to do that for yourself in some sense. You have to say, okay, Tristan, whew, yesterday was rough. What we gonna do today? What we have on our schedule today? Because that self-talk is so critical, because it's the old Joyce Meyer book, if any of you have read it, it's called The Battlefield is in the Mind, and that applies just from a spiritual perspective to just a psychological and science perspective. The battlefield is in the mind, and if we can get our minds to under control, like, okay, no, I'm not going to think these thoughts, I'm not going to tell myself these things, man, we could achieve so much. We really could, because it's the same thing we do with our kids, right? Like, hey, no, don't say that. Like, oh, if you ever hear a kid say, I'm stupid, you say, no, don't say that. Yeah. Don't, and I'm big on that. Don't speak that on yourself. Yeah. Don't speak that. I say that all the time, because words are so powerful. Even the words that you say to you. I had a friend one time when I was growing up that she had stickies on her mirror, so that when she woke up, she would see these stickies so that she could read to herself about herself. And I started, years ago, kind of doing affirmations and speaking affirmations over my kids and speaking affirmation over my husband, because those words carry so much weight, because they can heal an infection. Like like is the whole conversation. Your words can heal that infection.
Yeah, no, it was just when you were talking about just like talking to yourself, it's like we were listening to Brene Brown. It's like, I think she gave the example of like, you should talk to yourself like how you talk to your kids when they have done something wrong, or you're trying to basically uplift them. It's like, that's the mentality you should have of like, okay, you don't talk to kids. I can't believe you did that. I hate, you know what? Shame on you. I'm like, oh my God. You know what I mean? You don't talk to your kids like that. Most of us don't. Y'all better not be.
Y'all better not.
Y'all better not be. So, but you should talk to your kids. Like, you should talk to yourself, like it's like, hey, it's you know what? It's going to be all right. Yeah. You know what? You got this. It's okay. Come on. We're going to make sure we get through this.
And I think it's interesting because so many of us, somewhere along the way, we lose that, where we don't talk to ourselves like that. And it could happen in adolescence. I'm not sure, but there is this like turning point where you don't think that you're okay anymore. Like, it's like, man, I messed up my diet, or man, like I messed up in that meeting. I'm so stupid. Like, why couldn't I have gotten that right? How did I stumble over my words? How did I mess this thing up again? Or, I made that same mistake again. And so being gracious with us, with our own bodies, with our own self. And that's hard. I can speak, at least from my perspective. Sometimes you just look at yourself and you're like, what am I doing? Like, what did I do? How did I end up in this spot, in this area? Why? And I can sometimes not be so kind to Tristan. And I don't know if there's anybody else out there. I talk for myself, but sometimes it is hard when you have expectations, when you're like, man, I should be here. I should be doing this. This was supposed to happen. This didn't happen. If I had done this is what would have happened. And then I wouldn't be in whatever predicament I'm in, or be farther along, or not as far in this, whatever your case is. But I know that sometimes that's a challenge to know, man, okay, let's breathe through that. Yeah. Let's keep it moving. All right. What are we going to do differently the next time? Versus like stabbing ourselves in the front and in the back for what we didn't get right. And I want to say, because you mentioned this a little bit ago, it's not even just for people that had an absent parent. Like, you could be somebody that had a parent there and you didn't feel connected, or you didn't get what you needed. You could be somebody like that had an abortion or put up a child for an adoption, and you can feel that sense of like that weight, like, man, I messed up, or I did something wrong. And that, look, we are the most non-judgmental, like, we good, okay? But you have to reconcile that within yourself. You have to. And you have to do that not by ignoring it, not by being like, it was a long time ago, why do we have to talk about this? You have to talk about it because it's still affecting you and infecting you. It's still something that is defining, that we really have to discuss, really work through.
No, absolutely. I think, like you said, that language is the first kind of sign of like, if you have an infection or not. You got to figure out, okay, what am I saying and how is it affecting me? Mm-hmm. Right. And I think the next thing, how, infection potentially is there and you may not know it, is how you think what's possible. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You like, if your mind is blocked in the aspect, okay, you know what? I can't do that. And you don't realize, okay, why you say that? Mm-hmm. Well, something probably happened a while back, or somebody told you something that you have the ability of doing or not doing, and planted that seed in you. And now that's an infection to say, you know what, it put a limit on who you think you can be. Yeah. And, our schools and people that talk to our kids are so important, because like, they can speak life or death into them.
Listen, okay, so I wasn't sure if I was going to say this. Yeah. You were just talking and I was like, you know what, I got a story. And then you said that, so it was a confirmation. So we have a friend, and I'm not going to put anybody's name out there because I need permission to share people's personal info. Mm-hmm. But we have a friend who I consider a dear friend, has a beautiful daughter that's an amazing genius. And recently she was in school. She's doing the school away from school. So the home virtual school, because we're still in COVID. And she's working hard on her schoolwork, working hard, trying to make sure she makes A's. I mean, this kid amazing, genius, like really incredible kid, incredible mom. Okay. They have a story all their own. One day we might have them on, we're going to have them either on the conversation or we'll have them right here. But she did this paper. The rest of the class didn't do as well on their work. And the class said she must have cheated. And the teacher, this is on virtual learning, said, yeah, the kids at home are probably cheating. That broke this little girl down to where she said, it could bring me to tears, where she said, I don't want to do well on my tests anymore.
That's crazy.
Isn't that's what when you brought up the education thing, like, I know the same, Brene Brown, we were listening to earlier, she said, you have to keep in mind as a parent, you're not the only one raising your child. There are other people that are influencing, that are in their ear. So it's important for us as parents, because some of this stuff that we're dealing with today as adults started way back when we were kids in school. I remember being told myself, like, I would never in school, and my mom, if y'all ever meet my mom, she lit up the school, but I was told, you'll never graduate. You'll never be anything. You're going to be, before you get, this is by a teacher. Yeah. Wow. You're not going to be anything with your life. I'm 15, 16, maybe. And this little girl, same kind of being discouraged, and her mom is working to build her up, and just beautiful kids. But I bring that up because we have to be so vigilant with what our kids hear and what they see. And sometimes, we make mistakes. We don't address everything. It might be something that we do or that we say, but just making sure that we are alert so that we can be speaking life into our kids, because they're not getting life spoken into them everywhere. They're not getting encouraged to be excellent and to be amazing, and they're being told how important they are and what their contribution is. And that's the same thing that we have to do for ourselves, just like what we would do for our children, just like I would do for that little girl, or I would do for my own kids, looking in the mirror and saying, Tristan, you are excellent. You are awesome. You are doing what you are supposed to do. You are doing what you are called and created to do. You might not be where you want to be, but you're on the right path. You're on the right road, and you'll get there in the right time when you're supposed to. And making sure that we're saying those things, even with our brokenness, even with our scars and with our wounds and with the different things that have affected and infected and influenced our life, talking and speaking life over that. It's just like pulling out that splinter.
Yeah.
It really is healing.
No, absolutely. It's like, I think us as parents, that's a big responsibility, right? Of understanding who is speaking something to our kids, right? We don't want them to have an issue or get an infection because of somebody else, right? That's like the worst of the worst. But to me, just kind of just pivoting just a little bit on the same talk about the kids, it's like the worst thing I think about an infection is when it starts spilling over into your kids.
Yeah.
I'm the parent, and I have an issue, and my issue spills over into them.
Okay, let's go deeper. Dive into that.
Yeah, so it's like, I have financial issues, right? And like, I'm struggling trying to figure out, not being able to balance my checkbook or whatever. Do we have checkbooks still? Probably debit cards. Somebody have no checkbook really. Few people do.
We have business. You have a business checkbook.
Some people, business. If you got financial issues, you probably ain't got no business. I'm just saying.
You could be working towards something. Anyway, get along with your example.
I thought about checkbook, but balancing your account. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
that's better.
And like some people just have a struggle with it, right? And maybe it came from they didn't learn it, didn't know about it, whatever. And that issue or that infection get passed on to their kid, and the kid is like, why come I don't know? Why come I can't figure it out? You know what I mean? Ooh. Why come I didn't go to college or whatever? Their parents stopped, dropped out of high school and never really pushed them to go beyond, just go get, 12th grade and go to work. But, and to me, that's an infection of the mind and of like that mentality of saying, okay, hold on, there's something here. You putting a limit on yourself, and it came from a parent and you don't even know it. And I think us as parents, we got to think about like, okay, hold on. What have I dealt with, whether it's abuse, whether it's just somebody abandoned me, or whether it's a divorce, whether it's being a single parent, making sure that we don't pass that on to our kids. We got to, and how do you do that? You got to talk about it with them. Hey, here's what I went through.
Yeah.
I don't want you to repeat what I went through.
That's real.
Now you can make your own choice. You're an adult now, but I want you to know the story of what I went through so you can learn from it. A lot of times we don't do that. We don't talk about it like that.
That's awesome.
Especially when our kids I understand you're not talking about when they're, 10, 11, but at some point they get a certain age, like, hey, I have to do that with mine. You know what I mean? Because I've been through some stuff with, broken families, broken homes. I say, hey, you know what? I don't want you to be that. You know what? Here's the mistakes that I made. I don't want you to repeat that. Now you have to make your own choice on this, but I want you to repeat it. So, and I had to be intentional about that because I'm like, hold on, I don't want no cycle to be started because of a mistake I made.
That's real talk. Starting cycles. Like we talk a lot about breaking cycles.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm gonna break that generational curse, or I'm gonna close that door, but you can't really close it if you're not addressing stuff. Like then you're just basically pushing things back, pushing things in the closet because somebody's gonna open that door and it's gonna still be there. It's not gonna be dealt with.
Tell it.
So I think that's a really really important thing, is having the conversations about our own weaknesses, our own brokenness, showing our kids our scars, and obviously being discerning. Like don't do it when they're 7, but really having the conversation with them. This is what happened to me. This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I went through. So you don't have to go through it.
Absolutely.
That's critical. That's critical. So man, we jumped into a lot today. Thank you for joining us. Make sure that you connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at fusemarriages.com. We appreciate you for being here. Let's talk about it.
You're listening to Fuse with Tristan and Michael.